Hey everyone, welcome back to another update. Today we're covering April 4th through 10th, a pivotal 7 days that brought dramatic developments in the Iran conflict, escalating scrutiny over fraud in California, progress on the government funding standoff, and a historic milestone in space exploration. From a tense 2-week ceasefire in the Middle East to major anti-fraud actions and election integrity moves, we're sticking strictly to reported events from official statements, congressional actions, and major outlets. Let's dive in. The week opened with high-stakes military operations under Operation Epic Fury. On April 4th, President Trump issued a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran, warning of severe consequences if no deal was reached. U.S. forces conducted aggressive search and rescue for downed F-15E crew members, with one airman surviving nearly 48 hours in a mountain crevice. U.S. CSAR helicopters, supported by CIA deception tactics and advanced technology, successfully extracted both crew members. One was rescued in broad daylight, the second followed a high-risk raid. Both airmen are recovering in Germany before returning to the United States, and President Trump praised the operation and gave credit to the CIA. Strikes continued, including on Karg Island, Iran's key oil hub, the Parchin military complex, and other infrastructure, and Israel conducted separate operations against Iranian rail systems and Hezbollah targets in Lebanon. Iran faced criticism for reportedly recruiting children as human shields around potential targets and for using civilians in human chains at power plants and bridges. On April 7th, President Trump announced a 2-week double-sided ceasefire conditional on Iran immediately and safely reopening the Strait of Hormuz. He described Iran's proposal as a workable starting point for negotiations, though he later clarified it was not the maximalist version circulated publicly by CNN and rejected fraudulent claims. Iran agreed to the ceasefire and safe passage, though implementation saw disputes. Initial ship transits occurred, followed by reports of restrictions, toll demands, and temporary closures blamed on Israeli actions in Lebanon, which was explicitly not covered by the ceasefire. Oil prices dropped sharply, over 12 to 15%, and markets reacted positively, with the Dow rising significantly. Vice President Vance, joined by Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, traveled to Islamabad, Pakistan, for direct negotiations with Iranian officials, and U.S. forces remained positioned in the region to enforce compliance. President Trump emphasized no nuclear enrichment for Iran, removal of nuclear material under surveillance, and warned of resuming intense operations if terms were violated. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte met with Trump and expressed support for the operation's outcomes while urging Europe to step up. Some allies, including the UK and Italy, discussed assisting with security in the Strait of Hormuz. While all this was happening, there were some interesting events occurring stateside. While Trump was busy in the West Wing monitoring the search and rescue of the downed F-15E crew members, Democrats spread all over social media that Trump had been hospitalized and other unfounded theories. Secretary of State Marco Rubio canceled the legal status of slain Iranian Major General Soleimani's family members living in the U.S., and they're now in ICE custody pending deportation. On to California fraud scandals. California remained under heavy scrutiny for widespread fraud allegations throughout the week, with reports highlighting massive losses in Medi-Cal, estimated up to $146 billion, and the $30 billion in-home supportive services program. Experts cited 20 to 40% fraud rates due to honor system billing, fake timesheets, and identity theft, costing $6 to $12 billion per year. Chris Rufo and others described a cycle involving caregivers, unions, and political funding. Hospice fraud drew particular attention. A $267 million scheme led to charges against 21 suspects with several arrests involving stolen identities purchased on the dark web and fraudulent billing. 5 fraudsters were arrested in related raids, and state audits raised questions about licensing processes that allegedly allowed suspicious providers to operate. Los Angeles Mayor Karen Bass announced $360 million for NGOs to address homelessness amid ongoing debates, and critics, including Representative James Comer, questioned the timing and scope of state actions. Governor Gavin Newsom faced additional allegations involving utility company payments to his family and his wife's NGO, with Newsom and his wife reportedly receiving over $700,000 from California's largest public utility, PG&E, with around $300,000 of that going to her NGO. Then, when PG&E faced a $200 million fine for its role in wildfires, Newsom's appointed board reportedly waived it. Newsom blamed high gas prices on Trump and Iran, but NBC reporting pushed back on those claims, noting California-specific taxes, fees, and refinery policies. Steve Hilton, the Republican candidate for governor, revealed Democrats snuck a $1,350 per month charge for 20 years, tied to vehicle miles traveled, into AB 130, the bill Newsom touted as solving the housing crisis. Hilton explained, they're trying to punish single-family homes. They want to stop single-family homes from being built, and so they're going to put this charge on it, VMT, because if you build a new home, people are going to drive to their new home. That's vehicle miles traveled. Let's switch to the anti-fraud push. The White House Anti-Fraud Task Force under Vice President Vance identified $6.3 billion in potentially fraudulent contracts with a 30-day validation period and broader estimates of up to $500 billion in annual federal fraud, roughly 10% of the budget. CMS Administrator Dr. Oz stated that curbing fraud could double the Medicare Trust Fund's life expectancy and said he thinks the Cuban government communists may be involved in massive health fraud in South Florida. The Department of Justice, under Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche, reported surging prosecutions, over 8,000 active investigations, 93 added prosecutors nationwide, and guilty pleas and sentencings in healthcare and COVID fraud cases exceeding $500 million. Shifting to election integrity moves. Concerns of potential election fraud were amplified in Wisconsin after over 150 duplicate mail-in ballots were sent to residents in Green Bay, and the RNC sued Virginia over a law allowing non-residents to vote. The Supreme Court in Maine struck down ranked choice voting expansions for general elections, and President Trump strongly opposed ranked choice voting in Alaska. Scott Pressler flagged potential illegal aliens on Pennsylvania voter rolls, coordinating with Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon, and in response to rumors that Senator Mike Lee may become President Trump's Attorney General, Senator Lee committed to staying in the Senate to advance the Save America Act, which will likely be taken up by the Senate this coming week. Let's move on to immigration-related news. ICE reported over 453,000 criminal illegal alien arrests and over 2 million self-deportations so far during Trump's second term, and asylum grants dropped to historic lows at around 7%. President Trump honored Sheridan Gorman, the young Chicago woman killed by an illegal alien, and he highlighted over 320,000 births in the United States, 9% of total U.S. births, are from unauthorized or temporary migrant mothers. A Biden-appointed judge blocked the expiration of temporary status for some Ethiopian migrants, and Florida implemented English-only CDL exams. The Department of Justice sought the death penalty in an MS-13 murder case, and sanctuary cities faced potential loss of CBP processing at airports. Pushback against amnesty efforts like the Dignidad Act continued, with critics calling the act mass amnesty for over 12 million illegals, including those with multiple DUIs. Switching to news items I'm placing under the category of shady politicians. Act Blue was caught conspiring to enable foreign donations to Democrats, and Representative Ilhan Omar and her husband are under investigation following claims their business income surged from around $51,000 to $30 million in 1 year. Disgraced Democrat North Carolina State Representative Cecil Brockman is facing 8 child sex abuse charges and could face life in prison, and support is growing to expel Democrat Representative Sheila Sheriff-Phyllis McCormick from Congress after she stole $5 million in FEMA funds for her personal campaign. FBI Director Kash Patel announced that the FBI arrested former U.S. Special Operations and Delta Force veteran Courtney Williams for violating the Espionage Act, with the Department of Justice saying she transmitted classified national defense intel to the media, putting our troops at risk. The DOJ's Civil Rights Division has opened an investigation into Cassidy Hutchinson, the former White House aide who testified against Donald Trump in June 2022. Her testimony alleged that Trump encouraged the January 6, 2021 Capitol riot and lunged at a Secret Service agent. The probe stems from a congressional referral accusing Hutchinson of lying to the January 6th committee. Speaking of January 6th, a secret 2020 war game shows 274 undercover agents rehearsed mass prosecutions of patriots months before it happened. John Solomon reports this was a deep state setup to frame Americans to bury the stolen election. Minnesota impeachment hearings for Governor Tim Walz start this coming week, and Representative Eric Swalwell is facing sexual harassment accusations from multiple former staffers. One former staffer said Eric Swalwell sexually assaulted her twice, and one time she woke up in his bed with no clothes on. He tried to get alleged victims to cease and desist, and Representative Anna Paulina Luna demanded Swalwell resign from the House of Representatives after these allegations were brought to light. Former Speaker Nancy Pelosi has demanded Swalwell drop out of the California governor's race due to these allegations, saying the accuser should be able to have her case heard outside of a gubernatorial campaign. Let's shift to the partial DHS shutdown, NASA's Artemis II mission, and FLOTUS news. The partial DHS shutdown continued through the week with a pro forma Senate session lasting only about 30 seconds. President Trump signed a memo directing pay for all DHS workers and gave Congress until June 1st to pass full funding for ICE and CBP via reconciliation, which only requires a simple majority. Senate Republican leaders, including Lindsey Graham and John Barrasso, met with Trump to plan long-term funding insulated from future cuts. Airport lines had reportedly improved earlier due to prior measures. NASA's Artemis II mission achieved historic milestones. The crew, consisting of Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Koch, and Jeremy Hansen, traveled farther from Earth than any human before, flew around the moon's far side, and successfully splashed down off California on April 10th after a high-speed re-entry. The re-entry speed reached around 25,000 miles per hour, and the heat shield performed perfectly. NASA Chief Jared Isaacman received praise, and the mission marked a major step in lunar exploration. First Lady Melania Trump issued a strong statement denying any Epstein connection, saying, "To date, several individuals and companies have been legally obligated to publicly apologize and retract their lies about me." She also called for congressional hearings for victims, stating Epstein was not alone. House Oversight Chair James Comer agreed to pursue public hearings once depositions are finished. In other FLOTUS news, the Take It Down Act, backed by Melania, secured its first conviction against non-consensual AI-generated explicit content. Now it's time for the noteworthy tidbits, which are brought to you today by ZevoLife. Let me tell you about them quick. Looking for a game-changing way to improve your health? ZevoLife is the world's most nutrient-dense whole plant, packed with over 50% plant protein, essential amino acids, fiber, and antioxidants. Harnessing the best nature has to offer, ZevoLife nourishes your body while driving your performance, vitality, and overall well-being. Each serving is a concentrated source of clean, well-balanced nutrition designed to support modern lifestyles, and just 1 teaspoon a day supports your gut, boosts energy, and promotes healthier skin and hair. It's no wonder that it's receiving rave 5-star reviews. Step into a healthier future with a 30% discount and a 30-day risk-free guarantee by visiting zivo.life and using my promo code. To support my show and to receive 30% off your entire order, enter in my promo code JADE, that's JADE, at checkout. All right, let's get back to the tidbits. Trump signed an executive order on college sports, which places limits on earnings, transfers, and participation. Minnesota Democrats blocked a ban on boys and girls sports. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis pushed to impeach a judge who released a predator, banned Sharia enforcement, and investigated OpenAI after incidents. American journalist Shelley Kittleson was released after being kidnapped by Iran-backed militia in Iraq. Trump-endorsed Clay Fuller won the special election for Georgia's 14th district, replacing Marjorie Taylor Greene. Personnel and policy notes included discussions on potential U.S. NATO adjustments, federal job reductions, and deficit cuts via tariffs. Trump filed plans for a grand triumphal arch in D.C. and is fixing the reflecting pool under budget. Vice President Vance and Second Lady Usha arrived in Hungary to meet Prime Minister Viktor Orban. DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullen traveled to western North Carolina to survey hurricane damage and advance FEMA relief. Assistant Attorney General Harmeet Dillon confirmed that DeCarlos Brown Jr., the killer of Irina Zarutska, remains in federal custody after being found incapable of standing trial. Representative Chip Roy filed legislation to freeze the assets of the Council on American Islamic Relations, revoke CARE's tax-exempt status, and designate them an affiliate of Hamas. That wraps up our recap of April 4th through 10th. A week of high tension diplomacy and military enforcement in the Middle East, intensified fraud accountability at home, steady immigration enforcement, and an inspiring return from deep space. What stood out most to you this week? Drop your thoughts in the comments on Instagram or X at Shades of Jade Pod. If these updates are hitting the spot, subscribe, review, and share. Thank you for listening and have a great day.